everybody, how's it going? Joe Scott here. Welcome to the Answers with Joe live stream, where today I'm going to be sharing a few clips from a conversation that I had with a buddy of mine, Tom Mills. He runs a YouTube channel called Green Shortz. He has a few YouTube channels, actually. But this is a new thing that I'm doing, a little bit special. I'm actually sharing this because this was part of a podcast that I recorded with Tom. I do have a podcast going on right now. Not a whole lot to it at the moment. It's still brand new. And I'm still working out a lot of kinks. Those of you who follow the live streams know all about my kinks. That came out weird. But no, so this is basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do, my Monday videos and then bring on experts, or at least other creators to kind of comment on those topics in podcasts. And then I can share little clips from that here with you guys in live streams. So that's what I'm doing today. Trying something new. You guys let me know what you think. But yeah, so this is basically a follow-up on Monday's video where I talked about, why we shouldn't freak out too much about the United States leaving the Paris Accords. Now, of course, that's a political topic. Some might argue it shouldn't be political, but these things are these days. And I got I got all kinds of responses like I expected. You can't talk about these kind of topics without expecting to get that kind of feedback. And a lot of it was positive, and I want to thank you guys for the positive responses. A lot of you brought up criticisms and concerns that I didn't address in the video. Some of those were because they just didn't really fit into the points that I was making specifically. And some of them were because I really hadn't looked into it that much, or I didn't look into that side of the topic that much. So whether it was positive or negative or critical, I want to thank all of you for your comments. It definitely made me look a little bit deeper into this. And there were a lot of insightful things that I, like I said, I hadn't thought about. There were also a lot of comments that have kind of fed into some of the propaganda that's out there. And I'm not going to spend much time talking about it. I might possibly do a blog post to address some of those, because I don't want to take this channel too far down that road. I want to get back to the fun stuff. But one of the little ones that I will talk about just really quickly is, and I've seen this a lot on Facebook as well. It's people talking about the amount of money that the United States was supposed to pay into the Paris Accords. And this also is, I believe it was something that Trump was also referencing, that we're spending $3 billion into this thing, and that's more than every other country in the world and all that. And the one comment that I do want to make on that is that $3 billion in the scope of the United States budget is not that much. It's really not that much. And it was $3 billion between now and 2020. So it's $3 billion a year, or $3 billion over 3 years. And, the United States is one of the most populous countries in the world. In fact, I showed that graph in the last video that I was basically showing how many people are in China and India as compared to the rest of the world. Well, the number 3 country outside of those 2 outliers was the United States. Outside of the 2 major outliers in population, the United States has the highest number, and that's around 330 million people. So $3 billion over 3 years divided up amongst 320 million people, you're looking at about $3 a year per person. And when you break it up like that per capita, we actually rank like 35th in the world in terms of how much we're spending as opposed to other countries, especially some of the Scandinavian countries. So in America, it's really easy to just see that big number and kind of freak out. But I think the way the rest of the world looks at it, it doesn't look like that much, especially when you consider that we do 25% of the carbon emissions in the world. A lot of other people were upset that, China and India aren't paying enough into it. Some of those criticisms are valid. Some of them, I think, went into propaganda territory. But I want to make sure and say, I don't think the Paris Accords were perfect. And it's not, I didn't create it. It's not my job to defend them. And it definitely could have been better. And as I said myself, it was supposed to be a first step. It's not supposed to be the end-all be-all of, fixing this problem. To me personally, I think what matters the most is it was more of a symbolic gesture of the whole world coming together. And by us dropping out of it, I think it doesn't look good to the rest of the world and hurts our chances in terms of trade agreements and stuff like that. So that's just my take. Actually, I would say it's not just my take. It's the take of many companies that have spoken out about this, and even the Secretary of State, many other people. But that's where I fall on it. And um, there was, I asked people like if you could find something positive about this, please let me know. And a lot of you guys did step up, and you had some good comments. And one of them that I did hear a lot, and I think is a very valid thing, is that um, this action has brought the Paris Accords and climate change in general, and just pollution and clean energy and renewables and stuff like that, to the foreground and gotten people engaged in a way that they wouldn't have been otherwise. Now, I've even had some people say that that was Trump's agenda all along. I think that's giving him too much credit. I think they'll be giving anybody too much credit. It's not about him. But regardless, if that is the effect that it produces, fine with me. That makes me happy. And that kind of is a good segue to what I wanted to actually talk about today, and what I wanted to share with you were these clips from my interview with Tom, because it's more about like, how can people work on a local level? How can you work on an individual basis in your own backyard to make a difference, and maybe just feel better about yourself? Sometimes it just comes down to that. So this is something new. I'm going to be sharing these clips with you, and I do not promise that there won't be a technical issue. There's always that opportunity, that possibility. So let me share the first one. These are just some interesting stuff that Tom shared with me, stuff that I hadn't really thought about, but I thought was really interesting. The first one was one of the things that Tom's doing. He actually has 3 YouTube channels right now. One of them, he is actually building a house. It's called the Green Shortz DIY greenhouse project or something like that. But he's building a house from scratch. He's using totally green techniques and recycles and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted him to talk about that. And the first thing that he said really surprised me, because he started talking about how location makes a big difference in terms of being green certified and whatnot. I'd never considered something like that. I never even thought about it, but I thought that was super interesting, and I'm going to share that with you right now. So let's see if this works. Wish me luck.
We took some time finding land because where you build, it has a pretty significant impact on how green you can be. Certainly with regard to these certification programs, a lot of certification points come via things like transit. How close is a bus stop or a rail line, or
interesting.
Or can you walk to a store? Can you walk to a restaurant?
So that's super interesting to me, because I always think of green building as, kind of recycled materials and smart energy efficiency and that type of thing. But I don't think about, I would never have thought that was a part of it, that access to public transit and not burning, gas by driving and stuff like that would factor into it. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in fact, I think for our certifier, and actually you have a third-party certifier with, not your builder. Your builder can't certify the house. Someone else has to certify the house, because they're kind of making sure the builder is doing the job they're supposed to do.
They're like a regulator almost.
Exactly. And that's its third-party verification. So he was telling me that we could almost get the baseline certification on location points alone. So just transit, walkability, assets that are within a certain radius. So that kind of blew my mind. Is like, I don't have to build, much at all green in order to qualify. Of course, we're building green, but
yeah,
that kind of opened my eyes to the importance of location. In living, because it's not just a green home, it's living green. It's a green lifestyle. And so just having access to options to make those greener decisions is huge.
Well, I mean, again, I'm just kind of, you're blowing my mind for a second here. Because I mean, if you think about real estate in general, they always say location, 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 but it's like, access to good schools, access to, highway arteries, that kind of thing, and hospitals and whatnot. But this is a green side of that, which I never even thought about before. So that's really cool. So yeah, I thought that was super interesting. And by the way, if you were following, if you paid attention there, you might have noticed that I was throwing things at my dogs because they started having a fight, like they tend to do. As I'm trying to do something serious here, can't win. But no, so he was talking about being green certified and that you can actually get really close to being totally green certified just by the location based on how close you are to different things. That was something I never even considered, and I thought that was super interesting. Another thing that he talked about that I thought was super interesting was he was talking about saving rainwater. Now I know all about getting rain barrels and capturing it. And I always thought it was just more of like a wastefulness thing. You don't want to waste the water. But he actually made a really interesting point about how rainwater is actually much better for, grass and gardens and stuff like that. Because the water that we drink is always treated and purified and has stuff like chlorine in it and whatnot, fluoride in some cases. But the rainwater is pure, and also it has microbial influences that actually help the grass and the plants grow. I will let him take it from there because I thought this was super interesting. I thought there was a cool correlation between the way plants operate and we operate ourselves. So I will share that with you right now. Here we go.
It's better. Water's better for your plants because it doesn't have chlorine, so it doesn't have a disinfectant, which has which is necessary for drinking water. Mm-hmm. That has a negative impact on the biology of the soil, all those microorganisms that make soil alive and make it effective. So, plants don't take nutrients directly from the soil. They take it from the creatures, the organisms that live on the roots. Yeah. So the organisms take the nutrients and they convert it into plant usable nutrients, which is, to me, I just learned that recently. It's fascinating to me.
Well, it's kind of like our own microbiome in our guts. Like we couldn't survive without the microbes that are, eating up all the food once we eat it for them. Does that make sense? We're basically feeding bacteria whenever we are eating.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think
one of my favorite little useless facts is that there's I don't know the number, but there's far more bacterial cells in your body than actual human cells. You're more bacteria than human, really.
On paper.
No, I thought that was an interesting. That's always been one of my favorite little facts about being a human being is that we couldn't survive without this microbiome in our gut, and that our body actually consists of more bacteria than human cells. We are literally, in a lot of ways, more bacteria than human. It really starts to get into some real existential stuff about what does that make us who we are? What makes up a human if we're more bacteria than that goes down a whole rabbit hole there. But anyway, so I thought that was a really interesting point that plants feed off of that microbiome underneath the soil the same way we do, and that rainwater is better for watering your plants and for watering your grass than the tap water for that reason. Just thought that was super interesting. One more clip I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to kind of close this up and wrap it up and point you to where you need to go to watch the rest of the podcast. But I actually have some guy coming to pick up a couch that I'm selling, so I can't stick around too long. But anyway, so another point that he talked about was simply just recycling. Now, we all know about recycling. We all know you're supposed to do it. We all know that it helps save and that you use less, you consume less and all that kind of stuff. We kind of have a baseline understanding of what recycling is all about, but what he goes into here takes it a lot further even than I expected that it would. But it's talking about how when you recycle, you're actually saving energy. It takes a lot less energy to recycle than to create something from brand new from scratch, especially when you're talking about aluminum. And I thought that a lot of what he talked about here felt like it was kind of a return to the old days. And I'll let the clip speak for itself. But anyway, here you go.
I think that the first thing you can do is you can recycle as much as possible, and see at my daughter's soccer field and at the sports arenas, aluminum cans in with the trash.
Yeah.
And think about it, aluminum is, it takes 90% less energy to recycle aluminum can into a new one than it does to make a aluminum can out of raw aluminum or bauxite.
Yeah.
Just think about it that way. It's also a commodity. I mean, I take my cans, I don't put my in my recycling, I put them in a special box that I take to the local recycling center, and I get paid for cans. And right now it's about 30 cents a pound. So I think it would be, just for example, I dropped off a couple weeks ago about 40 pounds of steel that I'd saved from the house. I saved every little piece of metal I could from the house project. What I'm not going to reuse, I took to be recycled. I had 30 pounds of cans, and the cans were worth a lot more, like maybe 3 or 4 times as much as the steel. Actually, more than that. So recycling more. And then,
so if I could, like, just a thought that I just had, I feel like just hearing you say that, it almost feels like that is the way things used to be. Like the whole using once and throwing it away thing that we're doing right now, that's a relatively new thing in the big picture. Back in the day, our grandparents' time, obviously they were shaped by the Great Depression and everything, but I mean, they did collect everything. And I remember, my grandparents had a little press where they would crush all the cans and keep them. And we would, that was something that I remember doing as a kid. And I don't remember it being like a green thing. It was just like the thing you did, and I could see somebody that grew up in that time, collecting all the nails and all the little scrap and then taking them in and getting some money for it. I just think it's interesting, and maybe I'm off, but this is just my commentary. I feel like that's the way things used to be, and we're kind of going back toward that. Like, we kind of got off the rails for a while, especially with like plastic.
Yeah, I mean, it takes, if you fill up a plastic water bottle about a third of the way with liquid, that's as much oil as it took to make that bottle.
So the part of that really got my attention, and I think I had heard some fact about this before, but I didn't ever hear it the way that Tom just did, where he said that for every plastic bottle, if you fill it a third of the way full with water, that's how much oil it took to make that plastic bottle. A lot of us don't associate things like that between a plastic bottle and what kind of resources go into making that, plastic in general. And to be honest, I'll be honest, there's a project that I would love to do. I don't know how I would ever have the time to do this, but I was eating a burger one day and I thought it'd be really cool to follow the trail of all the different parts of that burger and find out, like, literally do an interview with every single person that had some hand in making that burger. I'm going off track here a little bit, but not really. But actually, think about it. You got the tomato on the burger. Okay, so somebody sold the tomato to that restaurant, so you could talk to the person that sold the tomato, and then you could go and talk to the people who actually worked in the fields to build the tomato, and just get an idea of all their stories and all their lives and everybody that touched it. It's I think the number would be in the dozens, maybe even hundreds of people that would have something to do with you eating this burger. And to me, I think that's fascinating. I think it's interesting how all these things are interconnected in ways that are frankly impossible for a human mind to really comprehend. And that goes in a lot of different directions there. But I'll call out a couple of the comments that I saw here. Jeremy said something about that people want to make change in the world, but will do FA themselves. I think I know what FA stands for. And I totally agree with you. I think there's so much, we think so big and high level, and we think, that the people in the buildings in the ivory towers are supposed to take care of all this stuff for us, when really we can be doing these things ourselves, which is the whole reason why I wanted to talk to Tom in the first place. Talk about little things that you can do in your own life and make a difference. And if not for the whole world, then at least for your little part of that world. I think there's something we can all do. And I think there are ways to do it, and there's more innovative ideas coming around these days of ways that we can do these things without completely altering our lifestyles, without completely becoming different people and having to move and do all kinds of stuff like that. Those things I find interesting. And while I'm going to move on to other topics, I'm going to get back to some more fun stuff. We've gotten into some heavy territory lately. Well, maybe the fidget spinner thing wasn't that heavy, but I want to get back to more fun topics, which I will be doing. This channel, I want it to be a mix of fun and important stuff, but the fun stuff is important to me anyway. So I'm going to be getting back to stuff like that. I'm not going to be dwelling on this stuff, but I would like to return to this subject at some point and simply talk about not just alternative energy sources, but just the energy sources of the future, what we have right now, what is the most efficient, what works the best, what has the most promise for the future, in a very honest way. I mean, I am an advocate for things like wind and solar, but it's not perfect. It's not the end-all be-all. So let's be honest about what it can do, and let's talk about ways that we can make it better, and innovations and ideas out in the future that might put us where we need to be so that we can have a cleaner planet. You know, whether you agree with climate change or whether you agree with the politics behind it and all that stuff, I think, nobody wants poison in their water. Nobody wants to have to wear a mask because it'll make you sick when you breathe, like, you see in like Beijing and places like that. Nobody wants that. So let's find ways to make things a little bit better, and let's find ways to be, as clean as possible and still be able to innovate and be able to move forward as a species. So that's my big speech. So controversial with that idea. Anyway, I really can't stick around too much longer. Normally I would do some Q&A right now, but unfortunately I do need to wrap this up. I want to thank, we got about 50 people right here watching. I want to thank you guys for joining. If you're watching later, I hope you enjoy. You can hit subscribe if you're new here somehow. Thumbs ups are always appreciated. And any ideas or things that you're doing in your life that you want to share in the comments, please do, and we can talk about it down there. As I said before, this is from a podcast. I've got a whole, I think it's like 45 minutes conversation that I share with Tom in my podcast. You can go to answerswithjoe.com/podcasts. You can find it there. It is available now on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. So whichever one of those you prefer, please check it out. There's not a whole lot of content there just yet, but I'm going to be trying to do these at least every 2 weeks for a while, and then hopefully eventually up to one a week. And I'm really excited about the opportunities that's going to give to share other ideas and interests and people that have really interesting things to say with you guys. And obviously any suggestions you may have for people that I could interview for the podcast, please send them my way. I would love to get a roster going. I think we could do some really cool stuff. Anyway, so it's Thursday, and one more day till the weekend. I hope you guys have a great one, and I appreciate you watching, and I'm going to sign off. Thanks a lot, everyone. Love you guys. Take care.